Okay. All right. Sorry, I had an echo, so I hope everyone heard me. So welcome to this morning's session, to our EU Circular talk on the taxonomy on sustainable finance and the question, what does it mean for the building and infrastructure sector? My name is Christine Lemaitre. I'm the CEO of the DGNB, the German Sustainable Building Council, and I'm happy to moderate that session this morning. That session is part of the EU stakeholder platform. That's a joint initiative by the Commission and EAC, who are organizing these circular talks and which we're now part of. So yeah, I think sustainable finance is like one of the big drivers for the past years when it comes to sustainability, to more sustainable efforts in the built environment. And this is what we would like to discuss with you this morning, to see where we are. Can we already have a prognosis? How does the taxonomy work with the ESG, which ESG is, I think, another big trend that has been developing over the past years. So we will have two panel discussions this morning, two rounds. First, a more general one, and then after that, you will have the chance for a quick Q&A. So I encourage our listeners to put their questions in the chat, and then in the Q&A, we will try to answer them as good as possible. And then we have another panel discussion, which is more looking from the market perspective, from experiences. And after that, we will have another 10-minute Q&A, and then we will summarize and hopefully maybe do an outlook. Maybe you have some good ideas what we would like to start as an initiative together, or what another circular talk around that matter could be. The circular talk is scheduled until noon. So please put your questions even while we move along in the chat. And then, like I said, we will try to pick it up in the Q&A sessions. So I'd like to start with our first panel, kind of more the general question on what is the taxonomy. And I'm very happy to welcome our three panelists. So while I introduce you briefly, you can put on your cameras. First one is Josefina Lindblom from DG Environment from the European Commission. I think everyone knows Josefina. Then we have Carolina Montano-Owen from the World Green Building Council. And we have Ben Allen from IEEP. I hope I said that correctly. He's a rapporteur on the Sustainable Finance Platform. Alan, is that correct, that introduction?
Yeah, the name was correct. I am the former rapporteur.
I don't hear you, so this is the first speaker test. Sorry.
Can you hear me now? Everyone else can, but not Christine. For the benefit of the audience, yes, I am the former co-rapporteur on the technical working group on the platform on sustainable finance.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. So, Josefina, I'd like to start with you, because you've been part of the, let's say, sustainability bubble of the Commission for many, many years, and you're the driving force behind Levels, which maybe not everyone here knows, but maybe from your perspective on how do all these different initiatives kind of feed into each other? Do they build on each other? Maybe you could briefly introduce what Levels is, because I think this is very important to understand, and then maybe what your take on the taxonomy is, or if Levels is basically playing a part there or not.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. Yes, I think that the sustainable finance is a great opportunity in many ways, and also actually to push the life cycle sustainability agenda for buildings, because it is a front runner where we can go further than what we can do from the very beginning in mandatory policy. Having said that, Levels is something that we are using as a basis for many of our, or I would rather say almost all of our policy initiatives from the European Commission side when it comes to driving sustainability in buildings. So what is Levels then? Levels is a framework for assessment and reporting of the life cycle performance of buildings. It takes on 6 different macro objectives, which were identified very early on in a great collaborative process back already in 2015. So it covers energy use during the whole life cycle of buildings and thereby carbon emissions. It looks at circular and resource efficient material flows, water use, health and comfort, resilience to climate change, and life cycle costing and value. These 6 areas were identified, as I said, many years ago in a collaborative process that we set up. Then we developed levels. We had a beta version actually, which was then tested and then finalized back in 2020. So we've been living, let's say, with levels now for a bit more than 2 years. And during those 2 years, we have been able to use it as a basis for bringing in circularity and life cycle thinking into different kinds of policies. Now, sustainable finance was one of the first one, because there's already a delegated act out there linking to climate change. And now we're developing this second one, which we will be discussing more today. But there are other pieces of legislation or EU initiatives, such as the European Bauhaus, such as Energy Efficiency Directive, Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, Green Public Procurement Criteria are being revised. And in all those different kinds of initiatives, we are making use of levels and the levels indicators so that we are sure that we're not bringing in different kinds of concepts, or maybe the same concepts, but in a different way in our different initiatives. That's very important to us. And I do feel that the fact that we have levels, which was actually initially perhaps largely developed because we wanted to provide something for building projects who didn't necessarily want it to go through certification, or maybe did, but still wanted to be guided somehow and see how their different decisions would impact the performance of their building. So we developed it largely for building projects, but now we can see that it's also having a good supportive role for different kinds of policy initiatives. So I think it's been a win-win in that regard. So we are able to move further in areas such as the sustainable finance as well, because we have levels. And as I said at the very beginning, I think the sustainable finance has a great can serve as a great push also for other policy initiatives, because if we see that it works in sustainable finance, it's accepted by the market and so on, and member states, it makes it easier for us to take the next steps, such as the mandatory Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. So it's a good circle, I think.
Okay, good circle is, I think, a good term for our circular talk. So I give it over to Ben Allen for his intervention and say a little intro into the insights of the taxonomy.
Thanks, Christine. Morning, everyone. So briefly, the EU Taxonomy is for those that don't know, it's a signposting tool, and it's to guide investments in a common way. And it's a common language that can be used by investors, issuers, by companies, by those that want to understand what sustainable means in the context of the taxonomy regulation. And this came about because of a long history of discussion around sustainability, but essentially that there wasn't a common system to understand, well, what do you need to do, in this case, in the building sector, to really have a material impact on sustainability? There were lots of different things going on, and we had various standards, etc. But across the board of investments and financial investments, there was quite a mixed picture. It is activity-based. I think this is quite important to the discussions that we might have or you might have individually. So it focuses on a classification of activities such as renovation of existing buildings, rather than being sector-based, which would, say, cover the whole building sector. So it's quite granular in terms of the way the taxonomy is actually developed. So any one company, any one business or fund might be investing or supporting multiple activities at the same time. And that's quite crucial in terms of how you report on the taxonomy. The taxonomy itself requires you to contribute substantially to at least one of the 6 environmental objectives. At least one, you can do more than one. And you must do no significant harm to all of the other environmental objectives. Those 6 objectives are, I think most will be familiar: mitigation, climate adaptation, the circular economy, transition to circular economy, biodiversity and ecosystems, water and marine resources, and pollution prevention and control. At the moment, as Josefina has said, we have in law the Climate Delegated Act, which includes around 80 economic activities and criteria for those activities for mitigation and for adaptation as well. And in preparation at the moment is what's known as the Taxo 4 Delegated Act. It is the other 4 environmental objectives being brought into EU law, and that's being developed at the moment. I think what's perhaps most relevant here is just to cover a little bit what circular economy looks like in the context of the taxonomy, because that I think everyone will have an understanding of what they think the circular economy is. In order to build the taxonomy criteria, so these are specific performance standards that an economic activity would need to meet in order to be aligned to the taxonomy, we needed to have a headline ambition level, a bit like we have with the the Paris Global Climate Agreement, where we have a set emission reduction target, which countries have signed up to. It's been adopted by the EU, and we have an ambition level against that. We did not have that for the circular economy when it came to constructing these criteria. So we had to develop that within the Platform on Sustainable Finance and ask the Commission to adopt that, or ask the Commission at least to use that in the development of the criteria. I think we can provide some links, hopefully we can. I would encourage you to look at the Commission's website and the platform website and the recent reports there, which will give the fuller text of this. But I'll just read one sentence from it, which is by 2030, economic growth is decoupled from extraction of non-renewable resources, and depletion of the stock of renewable resources is reversed. And by 2050, economic activity is largely decoupled from resource extraction through environmental design for a circular economy to eliminate waste, pollution, keep material products in use at their highest value, and to regenerate ecosystems. There's further text that goes on to specify different percentages and requirements for this headline ambition level, but it is effectively that level for which we've tried to develop criteria for these different economic activities. I say we, this is the final thing I'll say, the Commission are the lawmakers. They are responsible for writing the Delegated Act, for bringing these criteria into law. But under the taxonomy regulation, the Platform on Sustainable Finance is a requirement of that regulation, and it is composed of a series of independent experts. Myself, Carolina was also on the platform, who were tasked with developing these criteria, these headline ambition levels, understanding the methodology and how we build this together. At the moment, our reports are out and present on the Commission's websites. These are the reports of the platform. And as I say, the Commission are then developing the legal text for these additional 4 environmental objectives, which includes the circular economy. So at the moment, there is no circular economy substantial contribution criteria in law. There are do no significant harm criteria in the Climate Delegated Act, which includes mitigation and adaptation criteria. But at the moment, there aren't any, as I say, substantial contribution criteria for the circular economy. Those should come in, hopefully this year, within the Taxo 4 DA. Thanks, Christine.
All right, thanks, Ben. So on to Carolina to get a little bit more insight, especially in the circular economy criteria, which we have a draft version, I think, since, well, you tell us, a few months. Yes. I think beginning of last year, no, in the summer. Yeah.
Yes, we have some since March, and we have the second batch. It came out in October. So, well, thank you very much for the invitation. I have just a couple of slides to show you where we are, or what were the recommendations from the platform. So, just a quick introduction. I'd like to start by giving a quick introduction about the World Green Building Council. We are an umbrella organization that covers 77 national green building councils around the world, and we all support the private and the public sectors, as well as the academia, with initiatives to decarbonize the built environment and to achieve the sustainable development goals. So as Ben mentioned, the World GBC team was part of the platform of sustainable finance and the technical working group that developed these criteria. And since we want to focus our time today in a dialogue, I won't explain in depth these criteria, but I'd like to highlight the color code of this slide. The criteria you see here in purple on the right side represents the items that the group agreed on very easily. So we think that all the buildings should be using LCAs, electronic tools, or circular designs, as well as avoid hazardous substances. But you will see that through the taxonomy, you will see that in several criteria of the taxonomy, like the circular design, are referencing levels. As so Josefina was mentioning, this is the framework that will harmonize the reporting and the measuring methods for the EU. On the left side, you can see that the items were found more difficult to find a consensus. So you can see, for instance, that the quantitative criteria were these items. You can imagine that finding the balance between feasibility and the appropriate level of ambition with quantitative criteria was not an easy task. Some of the reasons for it included the lack of data, but also the difference between performance of the different member states. So we understand that the taxonomy represents big challenges, but we also see it as a game changer. At the World Green Building Council, we believe that the circular economy is a key enabler of a sustainable development, and the taxonomy could be the tool that accelerates the transition of the market. The EU Taxonomy not only will provide reporting and transparency, but will also support the development of local business models, services and SMEs by directing funds, but also by giving a more clear view of the targets we should achieve as a region. We understand it's not a perfect tool, but we see with good eyes that it's giving the first direction of where we should go as a region. And just to finalize, I want to say that the World GBC is supporting the taxonomy and the circularity principles to different initiatives. So we have a circularity accelerator, and we are also part of the Circular Building Coalition. We also found the Sustainable Finance Task Force that will come this year so that we can support more GBCs and more sectors to implement the taxonomy. I'll be more than happy to respond some questions about any of these initiatives. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to encourage our audience to put their questions in the chat if they have any. If not, I'll ask what I always wanted to know. So my first question actually goes to all three of you and goes based on what Carolina just showed, these percentages, or the question, what is the data source in order to design these criteria? Because we are now in the final stages with a group of green building councils. We did a study on 38 European buildings on these circular economy criteria. And a little preview is that we see kind of a gap between what the market is able to achieve and what the requirements in the circular economy criteria is. So my question is, what is kind of the data that was used to come up with these recycling quotes and so ever? And I think the other question we know from the first taxonomy round and study on climate and climate mitigation is the big question in the market. How do we get there? How do we basically can kind of award it already if we're on the path? Because we see, there's a goal in the criteria, but the market is not there yet in all the different aspects. So maybe question, I don't know, Carolina, maybe to you first, and then to Ben, and I think then Josefina as well, from some experience on how to get levels mainstreamed into the different countries in Europe. So.
Thank you, Christine. Yes, absolutely. So for the first criterion, which is the 90% of construction demolition waste to be prepared for reuse and recycle, that was not very hard to find. So now the average for the member states is 70%, and some of them already have very high levels. They are achieving up to 98%. So that was not very difficult to agree on. That 90% is something that can be achieved. The 50% of materials coming from reused, recycled, or responsible source materials, that was the one that was a little bit more difficult to find. So the current percentage of the current average of the member states is around 20%. So we wanted to double that, but as I said, we wanted to have the ambitions and give an award to those projects that are showing the high performance. And some of the exemplary performance can achieve up to 90%, 70-90%. So 50% came from the data that we have of the best buildings, but also kind of giving or finding the middle between what we want to achieve and what is the current market. We do believe that that can be achieved. It requires, of course, collaboration between local governments and the right infrastructure. So we need to have the platforms that bring together all the value chain, but I think it can be achieved. We already have seen it in many projects.
Well, and as well, the building material manufacturers are kind of like a key, you know, when we look at new construction. Maybe before I give over to Ben, there's a question in the chat. The first one you answered, but the second one, and sorry, I'm not familiar with what CDW is, but the question is, does 90% on CDW consider WTE as well? I don't know, Carolina, you know what? Just trying to figure out what these three letters mean.
So CDW is construction, demolition, waste.
Thank you. And waste to energy. Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I cannot see the question.
So does 90% on construction and demolition waste consider waste to energy as well?
Oh, no, not at the moment, no.
Okay.
Not as it's framed right now, no.
All right. Okay, maybe Ben, on to you, since you're very active as well on the Sustainable Finance platform. Is that something that, like the question, you know, I set targets, I set criteria, and what do we do, or what does it mean for the part of the market who's not there yet, who basically, you know, but they have like buildings at the moment and they're basically all not or many are not taxonomy compliant. So there's kind of like this chicken and egg problem that, you know, you kind of need compliant buildings in order to, you know, start that whole sustainable finance stream. And we see there's a lot of questions on how does that onboarding kind of work, or the pathway there. Is that being discussed, or are there any like ideas on how that could be achieved?
There are, and thank you for mentioning it. And I apologize in advance. I'm going to be pedantic about terminology because we spent two years focusing on this. So the taxonomy regulation, we talk about taxonomy alignment. So when you report on how aligned your investment portfolio is with the taxonomy, it is simply, are you meeting the criteria that the taxonomy set? It's not a compliance tool. So you are required to report if you're a certain size institution, financial institution, company, etc. But you don't have to, and I think this often gets misunderstood within the context of the taxonomy. You do not have to meet all these standards. It doesn't mean that you can't then have access to finance in a way. Obviously, going forwards, the whole sustainable finance, green financing, etc., will be geared a bit more towards the taxonomy, but at the moment you don't have to. So I think that's part of the answer. I think the two of the bits that
you don't have to do it, not yet, but eventually that should change. So, or?
Sorry, say that again.
But at the moment, you don't have to be aligned with the taxonomy, but the aim is that eventually it kind of becomes a standard or mandatory, ideally.
That's your view. I think that is a view that many would have, myself included, as an environmental policy person. But at the moment, my understanding of the development of the taxonomy and the sustainable finance is that it is that tool to point to the direction in which we want to achieve. So it is not saying that at some point everyone is going to have to align with taxonomy. Now, from my personal perspective, that would be wonderful, but it's going to be very difficult to bring the entire economy, not just buildings, but the entire economy to align with what's in the taxonomy. We would also need criteria for every single economic activity in the economy, which we don't have. I think we've only got something like, including Taxo 4, we'll only probably have 200 criteria. Obviously, the economy is much larger, but I like the ambition. I'm 100% with you on that. I think two things to add to this is in terms of where the figures come from. Carolina has given you the detail and obviously has worked on the detail of this. What I can say is that they're designed to meet what we consider to be a substantial contribution in the context of our overall targets. So this was a big discussion within the platform around, well, you know, some of these companies, some of these businesses, some of these sectors aren't there yet. And that's good information for us because we know they are not Paris aligned yet. There's still work to be done. There's still a transition. There's still a progress to be made in those sectors. But that doesn't change our headline ambition levels, because to create a circular economy, you need to get to a certain level by a certain time period. What the platform Sustainable Finance did do is one of the other subgroups worked on an extended taxonomy. So at the moment, the taxonomy is essentially binary. You're either in or you're out. You're in the green taxonomy, you align with the criteria, you meet the performance standards, or you don't. There's no middle ground. One of the subgroups of the taxonomy developed a extended taxonomy, which allowed an intermediary space, sometimes called the amber space, where you could be as a company, as a activity, where you are intending to make a transition. You need sustainable finance to get you there, to help you make that transition, but you're not yet fully taxonomy aligned because you're not yet meeting that standard. That has been put forward as proposals to the Commission, and we are waiting for that to be brought into law or for the Commission to do something with that. So the recommendation is there to have this transition, this intermediary space, but we don't have it at present.
Okay, all right, thank you. And maybe on that, on how to move the market. And I think like the biggest challenge, the first big step for taxonomy or to apply the taxonomy or to check if you're aligned or not is data transparency. So it's actually to know what I have, where we see in the built environment, maybe, I don't know how it is in other sectors, it seems like, it's like a cultural shift, because for many, many decades, it was not necessary. So Josefina, I mean, Levels is about reporting. It's about that transparency of data. So from your experience, how can we scale that? Even, I'm with Ben. I would like to see the taxonomy to become mandatory, but I think if we want to move the market, you know, these things have to become mainstream somehow. So what's your take on making it mainstream?
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to start by saying, coming back a little bit to your previous question, that it is not so that we see the sustainable finance suddenly becoming, the criteria there suddenly becoming mandatory in 5 years' time or something like that. I'm not aware of such a trajectory in any case. As I said earlier, I think though that the sustainable finance can sort of push other kind of policy of a more mandatory nature in certain areas, because it is sort of, you could almost say, testing the waters or pushing the market to be familiarized with certain aspects. So in that sense, I think it's not sort of a standalone thing which will not have any impact to anything else in terms of policy, but it is indeed not something where we have a clear trajectory. I think that so it is about steering investment. And of course, if we want to increase the ambition compared to today, we cannot expect that all projects out there today are already fulfilling this. Then we wouldn't be pushing anything. Then why are we doing this? You know. So I think we have to accept that. I think also that I speak, and I'm sure we all do, speak with a lot of building professionals in the supply side, architects, design teams, etc., engineers, but also product manufacturers who are very keen on this sustainability agenda and are working hard in it. But what it always comes down to, basically, at least in the conversations I have, eventually we do what the investors want us to do, what we are asked to do with this project. And so here we are providing, or the sustainable finance initiative is providing something which would push the demand side, the investors, to ask for these things. So I think that's really important. It is a bit of a new take compared to what we are typically doing, perhaps. I think that as we are sort of pushing the investors to go in this way, so that they will push building projects to provide certain performance, I think it will also be a way of pushing the market when it comes to education, for example, and training in this area. So it will sort of trickle down, right? I also want to confirm what Carolina was saying, that when it comes to how we have defined the criteria, we have certainly paid a lot of attention to the applicability and the practical aspects of it. Although we don't have, as most of the audience probably will know as well, we don't have enormous databases where we see exactly how different projects are performing on different indicators. We have lots of information from studies, from meta studies, which shows what are the top projects doing, what are good projects doing, and what are standard projects doing. And based on that, we have tried to find the right levels, so to say. Now, on your question on mainstreaming, I think it has to be a joint work from the investor side, from the building professionals, and from policymakers. We have tried to work to develop levels as to provide a basis of part of that. There's much more that needs to be done than what levels covers. I'm not going to pretend anything else, but I feel for the first time in many years, I feel that there is a lot of interest on the policy side to look at those different angles of a building, because as we all know, the energy efficiency has been the sole focus. And now I think we're all waking up, or many people are waking up and understanding that this is something that we need to take further. So I think it's a sector which is and will continue to receive a lot of attention. And I think from my perspective, I see how an important part of the sector is very much up to date. I see how the Commission is, I think, up to date. I think that some member states are, but many member states are not yet there fully. So I think that'll be an interesting work for everyone to sort of push that. And I can often see in the member states where things have moved quickly, it's often the sector itself which has been pushing for this. It's interesting to see the dynamics here. So yeah, a lot of us have to do our part.
All right, thank you. So now we have two interesting questions in the chat. I think the first one we kind of answered a little bit already. I mean, it's a work in progress. So the question is, what is the biggest flaw of the taxonomy in your opinion? I don't know if any of you, but I think we've covered already certain things, there needs to be work on, and especially like this chicken and egg problem, where's the regulation, where's the market at the moment? So that gets us to the second question, which I think is interesting for our audience to hear from you, because you're kind of in the center of all that, developing it and on the strategic level. The question is, what are the main benefits of the taxonomy compliance for a builder, and how would you convince a builder to invest in taxonomy compliance planning? But yeah, I think from your perspective and what you just said, Josefina, somehow I think it would be good if the market would, play their part. So yeah,
and
who of you would like to start?
Yeah. Just to say very briefly that I don't think it's not up to a builder in a project to on their own take this on. It really needs to be something which is, of course, pushed by the investor, the developer, the design team, and the building company. So it has to really be a joint work. Now, as a builder, of course, you play a very important role. I often hear that there is a bigger chance that the project provides what was initially foreseen from the design team if this collaboration goes on throughout the whole project, as opposed to sort of different parties coming and going, but that it is a joint collaboration throughout. But I'm not an expert in these building project dynamics, let's say. But of course, everyone needs to understand what it is about, collaborate, and put their part into the project.
Yeah, maybe, and I think maybe we don't have to look just at the builder, but in general. So Carolina, I mean, you're doing the Circular Economy Accelerator, you're working with other organizations, with, like market-oriented organization. What would you say? I mean, what do you tell them? What is the big benefit into looking into the taxonomy, and maybe even today already, make it part of their design process, decision-making processes?
Yeah, I will say two things. I think the first one is that high-performance buildings have been more successful in gaining funding and also being accepted by people. So we have shown through the business case, and now we have an updated version, that this type of buildings perform better, and they are better for people as well. So they are healthy, they are more efficient. So that shows that the market is the one that is kind of pushing the whole industry into a higher performance. But the second thing I will say is that taxonomy is being referred by ESG frameworks, and by aligning with the taxonomy, you are lowering the risk of stranded assets. So I think that's going to be a big push from the next couple of years, with ESG frameworks are taking the lead of how they are showing investors that these are the projects that are the ones that should be the focus on for the transition of the economy in the next years.
Okay, thank you. So now we get more questions, and we're almost at the end, but let's try to be quick. And Ben, I think the next question is maybe a good one for you. What is foreseen in order to improve review the existing EU taxonomy, in particular in the Climate Delegated Act? What is the, can you say something about the plan, the master plan?
I don't speak for the Commission. Let's make that really clear. I think at the moment we're trying to build the taxonomy. So as I said, we've got 6 environmental objectives we're trying to create criteria for. We only have 2 of those in law for the Climate Delegated Act. We would like to add the other 4, so we've got the full set of 6. I think only at that point will we then look at how does all that work together, and then do we know, have we learnt about these environmental objectives, about these individual sectors and activities, and is there an opportunity to review? What has been discussed within the platform is we don't want to review too early, because we're talking about investment standards, performance standards, which we don't want to change every couple of years, because then as a company, as a business, you're constantly then having to change what you're aiming for. So that's why so much work goes into the development of these standards, and ideally they'll be relatively long lasting. But the platform itself does have within its mandate the ability to be tasked by the Commission to review the criteria. The question is, at what point does that happen? What point does it make most sense? And a whole range of other questions. So I don't know when that would happen, but it is technically feasible at some point.
Sometime it will happen. Okay. Next question. I don't know, Carolina, if you can answer that. What quality compared to a certification DGNB lead do you achieve when you are in line with taxonomy?
Oh, maybe you can answer that better than me.
I can for lead. I can just say for DGNB, it is we're in the process of implementing it, but since the taxonomy criteria sometimes are asking for in a different way than the DGNB criteria, it's not like a one-to-one that if you're platinum certified, you're automatically taxonomy aligned and vice versa. But yeah, I mean, from what we see is that the certification helps to get very quickly to that level where you actually can look into the taxonomy criteria in a meaningful way. But it's not automatic. I don't know for lead if there are any comparisons.
We are working with the USGBC in a similar study where we are comparing the LEED certification with the alignment with the taxonomy. And I can say that part of LEED credits were used as a reference to develop the taxonomy. So one of the credits that is very popular from LEED has been about materials. So the EPDs is the credit that is more popular and has showed the highest change in the US and in other countries where LEED is used. So that the transition from materials and alternative materials has been one of the ones that have showed the most rapid acceleration. So I think we are looking at the taxonomy that similar things going to happen in Europe, where rapidly we can see that alternative materials are a good alternative for construction and supporting circularity. So we'll see what the study says, but I can say that.
Interesting that a US organization is doing a study on the EU taxonomy. Okay. Where does the concept of renewable construction products comes from, for Carolina, in your presentation? Is there a definition in the EU legislation?
No, not directly, but we are given different sources of what will be referenced as a renewable source. So we want to, again, give some ambition to that and promote more transparency. So giving more weight to be able to say where the resources come from. So we have some references there in the document, but there is no like a specific law for EU level.
Okay. And so let's try maybe the last two questions. How can we check that a building is do no significant harm? How can local authorities check if the building meets the do no significant harm requirements, especially for funding? Josefina, Ben, Josefina?
Well, I just wanted to say that just as for the main technical screening criteria, the do no significant harm criteria, you could say, also come, of course, with explanations as to what they mean, and there is sort of there are references to how to assess those do no significant harms. So it's not just a very vague sentence saying do something good, you know, it explains how you're checking things. So in that sense, it shouldn't be too different to the main criteria. There is no, as far as I know, there is no particular setup for the sustainable finance, which sort of, you know, you put in what your project is doing, you click a button, and then you know if you're eligible or sorry, if you're compliant or not. You have to go through the different criteria and work with them and see that you are that they function. And as I said, the criteria refers then to different kinds of standards or whatever levels in many cases, different indicators, which you need to go through in order to see if you apply or comply or not. I would assume that once this is up and running, I would be surprised, let's say, if the market itself does not develop certain tools that will help the users as well, because we do think that this initiative in general will create a lot of interest and push the market. But it is not something that the Commission at this point in time, as far as I know, is sort of preparing.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. So I think we're at the end. We now even took a bit more time. So thanks very much, Josefina, Carolina, and Ben, for taking the time, giving us some insight, answering all the questions. Like I said earlier, it's an ongoing work in progress project. So I think in a year, maybe it makes sense that we do as well an update and invite, I think, everyone to actively participate, and we'll see now in the next panel on what the market actually is saying and looking at when it comes to the taxonomy. So thank you very much. You're more than welcome to stay on the line in case, and if you really feel like I need to clarify that, you know, happy to bring you into the next discussion. But for now, thank you very much. And I would like to introduce now to our virtual stage the next participants of our panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
So cameras off for the first panel and cameras on for the next panel, which is Fernando Zichos. Oh, sorry if I mispronounced. You know, we always talk to each other on the first name basis. It's very hard with the last name. Who's going to present at the point of view and concerns of the construction SMEs. Fernando is at the European Builders Confederation, so there was already a question in the first panel. And we have Alexandra Quinn with us from Acidus. I think what Acidus does, she will tell us in her first intervention. And unfortunately, our third panelist, Manuel Ehlers from the Triodos Bank, had to excuse himself this morning. So it will be just the three of us, but if we get as many lively questions in the chat, I think we will cover the time very well. So Fernando, I'd like to start with you, give you the floor and the perspective of the SMEs and how they work with the taxonomy or maybe not work with the taxonomy yet. So the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Christine and Alexandra. If you don't mind, I have a few slides that I'd like to share. It will help. Sometimes it's helpful. Give me a minute and let me know if you can see this properly.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So, good morning again, everyone. My name is indeed Fernando Sitchos Jimenez. You did well. No worries. It's always a challenge, my family name. Well, maybe a quick point about indeed EBC, European Builders Confederation. So we are the European organization representing construction crafts, micro, small and medium-sized companies. At European level, we are based in Brussels. For a point of reference, I would like to mention that we are a member of SME United, which is the European organization representing SMEs of all types at the European level, and actually they are our main interlocutor in the fields of the EU taxonomy and sustainable finance in general. My intention with my presentation is to do a very quick reality check, because indeed we have heard about many initiatives, a lot of ambition, but we need to go back to the basics about construction as well and buildings. First of all, as you might all know, even though we always have a bit of doubts about the percentages, the figures, we know that the overwhelming majority of companies in the construction sector are SMEs. We also know that in that 99% of companies, of SMEs, sorry, around 95% are micro companies with less than 10 employees. So a key actor in construction, maybe the key actor, are the micro companies, the local businesses that are actually trying to conduct all the ambition that is set by member states and the European Union. We know that our field of activity, our sector, is on the brink of a green and digital transformation that will change the way buildings are made. In this transformation, however, this transformation will not happen on its own, and the key actor in construction needs support for the most challenging changes that are planned. In this sense, we see at the European level an European framework that is made of dossiers that are related to sustainable finance, ambition in sustainable finance, but also in sustainability reporting. And for us, our first concern, and I'm happy to hear Mrs. Lindblom mentioning the fact that level is used as a point of reference in many European legislative dossiers, because that's something that we already fear, is that we see a lot of ambitions that are correlated. Here, as you can see on the slide, we have a sustainable finance with, yes, the taxonomy, the delegated acts. We have a platform for sustainable finance and sustainable reporting. We have the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. We have the advisory group, IFRAC. We can even include here the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. So we see a framework that is linked, organically linked, and that is not always readable, understandable by SMEs. So all in all, how will the taxonomy actually affect construction SMEs? The truth is, at this moment in time, we don't know yet the potential repercussions, and actually our members and their members, their companies, because our members are national associations of SMEs, have a lot of fear and concerns regarding what is ahead. Many questions about the taxonomy. Maybe they will come in the chat as well, but about the taxonomy of the SMEs, or our SMEs are wondering, how are we going to avoid greater complexity of credit systems? Is taxonomy compliant going to become a quality label for construction companies? That's a very strong fear. then it's not only about us. In a transition, in a transformation, many actors will also need to adapt. And we're wondering if public officials are ready for these new rules and for all the additional administrative burden that it will create. How can we avoid dependency on consultants, accountants? We're making the reporting on sustainability, we're making accountancy more complex. So all those are the questions that we are thinking about, trying to look for solutions. Then concretely on the reporting part, sustainability reporting, main fear today, because we are not directly, our members are not directly impacted by the legislation, even though we think that we will in a few years. I think it was mentioned that as of 2025, sustainability reporting criteria will apply to small contractors. How to avoid the trickle-down effect from larger companies today. Are the reporting standards that are being developed, do they take SMEs and trust as the norm? And then it was mentioned, how are banks adapting in order to provide guidance and simplify the reporting? So you see, this is very fuzzy. It's a complex mystery, but what we know is that there is already an increased pressure on the limited human and financial resources that SMEs have. So very short, we try to, let's say, understand better the topic. That's our role in EBC in order, to maybe change the way our concepts are formulated in a way that makes more sense and corresponds more to day-to-day activities. And here are the initial thoughts that we have, is that we all know that the construction sector is key to achieve a climate neutral Europe by 2050. We know that sustainability can and will shape business models as well as client and investor behavior if the criteria are clear and applicable. And today this is a concern. Then again, and this is in general, SMEs need pragmatic, simple initiatives, simple system. We know that sustainability and circularity are data-driven. We need to talk about performance. We need to talk about testing. And we know that the reporting part is paper-driven. It's an administrative issue. So we have a lack of balance here, because to go towards the goal of a greener construction sector, we need to find solutions for the collection of data. Most of buildings that we are talking about are actually focused, targeted by renovation works. We're not necessarily talking about new construction, and renovation is the main market for SMEs. So a balance, something has to be done there. And then today, just in a kind of nutshell, SMEs are worried, yes, in their indirect reporting, trickle-down effect, access to credit by banks, and the fact that what is being developed is very complex and doesn't necessarily think of, let's say, the weakest link in the discussion about sustainable finance, which are SMEs. So we should be taken as the norm. I'm not going to repeat it. It's just for those that will have a look at the presentation. This is the core messages. Yes, we know we are affected already. We had our last board in December, a month ago, and indeed having a conversation about the topic, we are already starting to hear about certain companies being forced by banks to develop a kind of sustainability reporting scheme in order to prolong their credits. So we are there, and this is an issue because officially, as far as we know, at the European level, we're not directly impacted by the current regulation. So this is very, very fuzzy. Last thing, in order to be very quick, a few months ago, 2-3 months ago, in the context of the Construction 2050 Alliance, which is a informal platform of more than 50 European representatives of the construction value chain, we organized an event that it was similar to this one. What is the impact or potential impact of the taxonomy or sustainable finance on construction? And it was very clear that we need to do more about raising awareness on this topic. We need to do more in order to get a better positioning of the people that are in the construction value chain, because it's, again, very foggy. Here you can see, out of all that event, with, let's say, property owners, large contractors, small contractors, real estate, product manufacturers, we have really a real representatives in that informal platform. Those are the 6 messages that we took, and those are in line with what SMEs feel. We know construction has a huge potential for achieving the EU Green Deals. Great. That is again underlined in the taxonomy, in the sustainability reporting schemes. We think that the taxonomy may offer finally an European approach for sustainable construction. I won't say definition, but an approach based on existing EU regulations, but we need criteria to be improved. We think that the taxonomy can set up new benchmark for competitiveness. Yes, as far as it is applicable. Taxonomy must create the conditions of mobilizing capital. And here is how we need to understand also the point of view of the financial sector. And for them, the message we got at that event was, it's less complicated than it seems, but it's true that we need to do a lot of translation of all the technicity into something that is more applicable. And then, I mean, the last, the 5th one is quite self-explanatory, but the last one, we don't need to make the taxonomy a label that will cut off companies from financing and funding. This is the main concern as of today.
All right, thank you very much. Fernando, a bit a different vibe than from our first panel, where, you know, even if the taxonomy is not mandatory, I think it was a very clear message from your side that even if it's not mandatory, it's used as a tool, and that moment it becomes kind of mandatory, at least for some. But I think this is something we will maybe have in our discussion. I don't know, Alexandra, I give it over to you. What your take is on, it's not mandatory, but somehow the market kind of starts expecting it if you want to have a certain quality. But yeah, over to you to get an insight from what you do at Acidus.
Yeah, good morning and thank you very much. Yeah, I'm happy to share our Acidus approach, and I also prepared some slides. We can get through it. I try to make it as short as possible so that we can discuss different point of view. Okay, I shared my screen. I hope you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, properly. Okay. Yeah, I would like to give you an insight of how Acidus integrated and manages the EU taxonomy in the project development. And I would like to start with what Acidus is and what we do. So Acidus was founded in 2019. So Acidus is quite a young company, and it was established with sustainability at the core of business from the beginning. Acidus is an investor developer, and as this kind of developer, the company develops exclusively ESG-compliant offices and mixed-use properties and districts in urban locations in Germany, and the requirements of the EU taxonomy for construction of new buildings and significant contribution. We heard about this from the colleagues previously. Climate mitigation are integrated into the ESG strategy. So Acidus real estate developments are designed as sustainable or impact investments, and with these we pay attention not only to the financial return on investment, but also, and I would say an equal balance to social and environmental factors and the company's good governance. We have a strong foundation for our work, and this is the Acidus ESG impact model. And this model is based on the requirements of the EU taxonomy, but also on national and international sustainability standards. So this is what we basically work with when we manage and develop our real estate projects. So Acidus is clearly committed to ESG. We are committed to acting in an ecologically and socially responsible manner. And that is why our overall objective is to generate positive contributions to socio-ecological transformation through impact and urban development. For us, ESG plays a specific role. As I said, it's in the core of the business model. And for us, ESG is a forward-looking approach to assess risk. We also heard about this previously, arising from the non-fulfillment or violation of sustainability standards. And I think this ESG commitment, and we see it also on the market from other companies and developers, is very essential to deal also with the taxonomy. So as I said, we have a strong foundation, and this is a short overview of what this Assiduous ESG model is about. We have a holistic idea of ESG, so it's not only about ecological issues, but of course also we deal with social aspects, as the taxonomy also does, especially in terms of supply chain management. So we know about the minimum safeguards in the EU taxonomy. And of course, as we know about the impact of the construction industry, waste and materials play a specific role within this model, and the criteria, as I said, are integrated into this model. The model is basically useful as our strategy, and we also use it for measuring sustainability or ESG. And we defined a target system. I can show you the target system with the next slide, but also with KPIs. So we clearly defined how to measure what we want to achieve. I put the link to our website, to the ESG model, onto this slide. I would like to invite you to go to the website later on and discover. We discover it. We published all the KPIs we work with and how we measure ESG, and also how we handle the EU taxonomy. So this is the target system, and as we talk about circular economy today, I marked these two objectives that we have that are at the core of the topic. So we develop recyclable buildings using recyclable building materials with a focus on easy to dismantle structures. And of course, in terms of waste, we ensure zero waste during construction and operation. The reason why we integrated the taxonomy into our strategy and the ESG model is that Assiduous operates with an Article 9 fund, and the special alternative investment fund is aligned, of course, with the EU taxonomy. The substantial contribution is climate change mitigation, and of course, as it is required, all do no significant harm criteria of the taxonomy are integrated into the investment strategy. So the do no significant harm criterion for circular economy plays a role in this investment strategy. And I'd like to give you an insight of what the investment strategy is about in this specific field. So we defined with the National Financial Authority that we measure the circularity of our portfolio for this fund with a Madesta standard that some of you might already know, to assess the circularity of materials used in the buildings in order to increase the proportion of circularity in the buildings. So we talked about the criteria of the taxonomy a lot this morning, and these are the issues and the content of the do no significant harm criterion for circular economy transition. And this is what we deal with in the model, in the ESG model that Assiduous uses, also in the investment strategy. But as you could see previously in this extract from the investment strategy, this is only a very small picture. This is what we agreed on with the financial authority. But of course, and Josefina also highlighted this, the do no significant harm criteria for circular economy are much broader. And I'd like to show you these in order to understand what we then deal with when we develop our project. So at least 70% by weight of the non-hazardous construction and demolition waste generated on the construction site is prepared for reuse, recycling, and other material recovery. And then we have the issue of limited waste generation. So we need a strategy of how to avoid waste on the construction site. And then there is the aspect which goes mostly together with the investment strategy part for significant contribution. Building design and construction techniques support circularity. This is one of the three also very important aspects we see in the taxonomy. Here I would like to give you an idea of how we think at Assiduous we can ensure EU taxonomy compliance, and this is what we want to achieve, and also communicate to our investors that our developments are taxonomy compliant. And from my point of view, and this is what I reflected on this special topic, we have to make sure that we can make our project developments EU taxonomy compliance, and these are certain steps that we have to go through in order to achieve a verification at the final step. So the first is that we first of all understand, and we already heard about this this morning, that the taxonomy is quite complex, and also for small and medium-sized companies, Assiduous also is. It's quite an intensive process of going through the taxonomy and understanding of what it's all about, what all the criteria are all about. And we found the EU Taxonomy Compass, which we think is very helpful to understand and learn how to manage the requirements that we have to fulfill. And then we have the ESG strategy that we think is the starting point. When we have a strategy and we can implement the requirements of the taxonomy, it's easier to handle and manage them. Then we have the gap analysis, and what I think is very, very important is to do this gap analysis for the whole development of projects. It's not one moment that you do a gap analysis and then things go easily, but this is an ongoing process, so to say. And then what is also very important, I think, is that we team up with the planning and development team, but also with the financial department, because it's not that one person or one sustainability team can handle this compliance, but we need to team up with many people that deal with the properties. So in the end, of course, the verification and reporting, we want to disclose information and show our investors and other stakeholders, of course, too, that we have this very high quality of the taxonomy compliance that we can guarantee. So, and I brought one example from our portfolio that has a very high and very comprehensive circularity strategy. This is the example of Zille Campus. It's a project that we develop in Berlin. It will be completed in 2024, so next year. It's an office development, and here the preservation of the existing building is at the core of the strategy. It's a building, an existing office building from the 1950s, which is extensively redeveloped and supplemented with new buildings in timber construction. And this campus is a development as inner city redensification combined with unsealing of previous parking areas and biodiversity enhancing structures and design. And as I said, it has a very comprehensive circularity strategy. I would like to show you this to give you an idea of what the different aspects of circularity is. And we
Hello? I don't know who, can maybe someone put on the camera to make sure you still hear me? I think we lost Alexandra. Alexandra, you still there?
Yeah, I'm very sorry. I was off for a moment, I think. Can you hear
No,
me
I think we
again?
all were. Okay, so now we're
Yeah,
back on track.
okay. I'm still
Okay.
here.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
So now I'm not sure what was the last sentence that you could hear.
You were showing that project in Berlin, and now the
Yeah.
last sentence. I'm not sure, but I think
Yeah.
did you stop sharing your presentation, or was it terminated? I'm not sure.
I'm also not sure. But can you see my screen now? Fernando is also back again.
Yeah, no,
No.
I don't see
Okay.
Fernando. Yeah.
Back, but it
You're
was muted.
back. Okay.
Okay, so we're all back. So I don't know, Alexandra, were you at the end? You just showed the project in Berlin, and you
Yeah.
were talking a bit about the principles for that project. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
the circularity strategy, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So these are the key aspects of the circularity that you can see here, and yeah, they meet the requirements of the EU Taxonomy, but you can also hear with the LCA that we do for the whole building and covering each phase, and also the digital inventory and circularity assessment. These are aspects that we see in the significant contribution definition for circular economy also. So the strategy goes a bit further, and it's very, as I said, very comprehensive circular strategy covering the requirements for do no significant harm, but we think that we should go a bit further and implement further steps of the requirements of the taxonomy, as we can see here on the screen with LCAs and the digital inventory, as I said, with Madasta, our cooperation partner. And I think this is a very important aspect also for meeting the requirements and reaching a high-level circularity strategy in the developments, that we have a strong partner network. And I think Carolina also mentioned this. We can meet the requirements of the taxonomy only when we have a strong network and strong partners that have the capacities and the knowledge for circularity, and that we can work together and team up with and guarantee the high quality that we want to achieve. Yeah, so these are some thoughts from my side, what I think challenges and opportunities for developers are, and then I would like to come to an end. We can regard the taxonomy as a barrier, but I think we can also regard the taxonomy as a guideline, and this is what I definitely prefer. So with the taxonomy, we have a guideline, we have the very clear criteria. Some people might say criteria are not that clear and we have to discuss. Yes, of course, there's room for interpretation of the criteria. But we also see from the side of the EU Commission that this is something that is being discussed there, and we see documents that are published where certain questions are dealt with. Yeah, and as I said, we have to team up and collaborate and share knowledge. This is, for me, one of the most important things in terms of the taxonomy compliance. And of course, that we have to think beyond minimum requirements, as I showed with the strategy for our project Zille Campus in Berlin. We have to think beyond, and because regulations are the regulation is dynamically developing and becoming more stringent. When we plan a project, we have to think further. And this is also something that we always like to address, that the taxonomy and doing impact-oriented ESG strategies is that you need a high willingness to learn, and they have to communicate, go into dialogues as we do this here today. So that's it for the moment, and I'd like to discuss and see what the questions from the other participants are.
Okay, so thank you very much. So maybe since I'm the moderator, I will ask the first questions, and then we go to all the questions we have in the chat. But maybe Alexandra, first to you, because you used ESG, environmental social governance, and kind of taxonomy in one context. So maybe you could, because there are no official ESG criteria at the moment, but ESG is a big kind of upcoming or coming topic. So maybe you could explain a little bit, how you see the synergies between ESG and taxonomy, or where the market and your competitors are at the moment.
So first of all, maybe where we are at the moment, I think that we are in a transition phase. I think everyone can have an idea of what ESG is. And as I said, the taxonomy is a guideline. We can use it. It gives the criteria. We have all the issues addressed in the taxonomy, and we can discuss it within the companies and develop strategies regarding the topics that we think are the most important. Of course, we have to focus on certain topics. From our point of view, it's very important to not only look at economic criteria, but also to focus on the social sustainability, as it is as important as the ecological is. And when we look at ESG and the application of ESG and bring it into the projects and into real estate, I think we can do a lot. We can do a lot more. We have to be more experimental also, and try to try things out. Try to come to the point that we do not hesitate any longer, but define strategies and find ways, and also do it together with our partners, find ways, discuss it, and come to the point that we do developments that are ESG compliant and that have a very high quality of ESG and that are a bit more sustainable. But we know that we can be very sustainable, that we can be impact oriented, and we need a strategy and go beyond this point that things are impossible, but we can do it, and we can see it with City Campus in Berlin with our own project developments, but we see it already in the market that there are so many lighthouses, also ESG lighthouses, but we have to scale up, of course, and we think that things are barriers, but we can go beyond.
Okay, thank you. So maybe a question to both of you, because we heard in the first panel that the taxonomy is not mandatory, and at the moment there are no plans that it becomes mandatory. From both your presentations and different perspectives, it felt, but at the same time, the moment something like the taxonomy is out there, the market is picking it up. It becomes something people use as a tool, as a common language. So it kind of becomes mandatory, not by regulation, but more from the market perspective. Would you, I don't know, Fernando, from your point of view, would you confirm that impression I got from your intervention?
Yeah, definitely, because it's not just the taxonomy. I think there are circularity sprinkles a bit everywhere in many legislative dossiers at the European level. So we know that circularity will be a major part of a future, let's say, more sustainable construction. We know that. So the taxonomy might not be compulsory right now, but as I was saying, reality is that banks, at least, are already being influenced. And that's what we are afraid of, is that even though we fully agree we need to make our sector greener in whatever definition you give to greener, we know we are very responsive and responsible when we are talking about waste collection, etc., etc. So we really know that sustainability is going to be major and going to have an increasing role. Good. The thing is that now, when you look at the day-to-day activity of a small construction company, is that we are facing several pressures. One being that, the geographical, geopolitical context in which we are, where energy has become a very, very difficult topic, because energy is putting a lot of pressure on materials, on the supply chain, etc. At the same time, we know that the ambition is to deliver buildings that are as energy efficient, as let's say, as environmental responsible as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have clients that are struggling because of the geopolitical situation with the energy prices, looking to invest in energy efficiency, but also looking to invest with a minimal risk. When we receive, let's say, projects for renovation of buildings, when we go now to the banks, the fear is, are they already setting up a system, as in the example I mentioned in the Netherlands, where we, in addition to dealing with all the price constraints, with the request from the clients, we need to have an administrative burden where we need to develop knowledge in a topic that is very technical, and that when we're talking about local businesses, family businesses, 5 people, 10 people max, we don't have a financial department. We don't have all that knowledge, so we need to build it up, and it takes time. So today, yes, it applies, and it applies at the moment where the reality check between the ambition and the reality of the market are very imbalanced. So yes. Now I was reading in the chat that someone is asking, where is the taxonomy going to impact your day-to-day activities?
Mm-hmm.
And it made a right list, but access to credits is the one that we are the most afraid of now, because this is the first one where we see activity from the financial sector saying that we need to adapt to that part. So, okay, what can we do is to receive guidance, support from banks, from the financial sector, to simplify the reporting part. Let's say, I mean, you know that one difficult part is to reuse existing information. Maybe there is information there related to buildings that should be more available, more clear, more precise, that already is in the SME loan portfolio, that could be rebranded as part of the sustainability reporting part. It's too early to say, but we need to figure out a way to indeed simplify the understanding in the applicability.
Okay, so I think there was already like a answer to some of the questions we've seen. So basically, it's about, or what you would suggest, or what we would need, is a more pragmatic approach. We have to build the knowledge. I think capacity building is a very strong part, and I think there we have like the question of what happens on the EU level, and then really bringing it down to the market. And yeah, so I think this is kind of the quest for more pragmatism, I think, is a very big part. Coming to, bringing it to the market, because we heard that earlier, that somehow the market has as well power, to push regulation in their various countries. But on the other side, that means investing in time, in knowledge. Alexandra, I mean, what you presented, and I know Asidos has been very dedicated, but from what it looks like, you put a lot of energy and effort in generating basically your target framework, where you looked into different standards, into the taxonomy, into like reporting standards we have in Germany. I mean, but could you give an idea on how much time it took for Asidos to do that? I don't ask how much money, but just to as well, give an idea, because it's always, I think, easily said by, regulators or so. It's like, yeah, the market, but the market invests at least time, and sometimes time can be calculated one-to-one into euros, what that costs. But could you say what time frame you were working on until you had that framework ready, and then you had to go through that discussion with the German financial authority to have it compliant? Just a rough estimate. I know we don't want to
A
get
rough
into your-
estimate. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
try to. The ESG model, this was a process that took several months, but I think this is a very regular time frame for developing a sustainability or ESG strategy. And of course, this was a longer process, and there were many people that we could luckily develop it with. So we had our own team, the Acidos team that worked on is our CEOs, but we also had experts from extern. We had sustainability consultants that worked with us on the strategy and that gave very much into this into the development also of the scoring system. So they were experts in scoring systems so that we could measure it, because as I said, Acidos is committed to ESG, and when you commit to ESG and you say that you're taxonomy compliant, you want to be reliable. So when we talk to our investors, of course, we want to show them and tell them that we really can measure what we aim at, and this is the quality that we would like to give to our project developments and to our stakeholders. And of course, this takes time. So it's we have on the one hand the strategy, the model, the scoring system that we developed, but I think so this was several months, and then we said, okay, now we have a model and a system that we can work with, and that we could build a fundament for our developments. But of course, it's an ongoing process. As we know, we have impulses from the market, we have innovations, we have an ongoing regulation that we would like that we like to guarantee that the strategy and the model and the system is always up to date, and that we can guarantee that we are up to date and do high quality sustainability in our developments, and have the assets with a high quality in terms of ESG and taxonomy compliance. And then we have, of course, we have as we want to guarantee that we have an internal team that only works on this topic with me and some colleagues that we work with.
Okay, but I think, I guess, and then if you think, everyone does that, but Fernando, looking at the SMEs, would you be brave enough to do an estimate what you would think, how long it would take? Or do you know examples where you have some members?
Honestly,
Yeah,
I wouldn't dare, because the core membership of our organization is really micro companies. Most of them are micro companies, so which means that the financial department, the human resources, the training part, everyone is 1 or 2 persons out of a team of 5 to 6, 7, 8. So that's what we would like to dive in order to understand better indeed the pragmatic side, because it's not just about complaining and say we are afraid of what is coming, but it's also to understand with those that are maybe a bit more advanced where we are. And today, to be honest, we are doing that exercise. We need to do that exercise in order to see how difficult it is. But at the same time, we hope that, considering the different actors that are going to be that are going to be impacted, again, financial sector, public officials, we hope that certain guidance, but guidance that is with a spirit of simplifying the understanding and the applicability is going to be developed. As far as I know, now we have very technical and complex and long documentation that still needs to be figured out in a way that it reaches the actors of the sector. So, okay, we are on the path, but still in an initial stage, I must say.
Okay, and there was one question tapping into that as well, the workload, because we saw so many different initiatives. I mean, I can just say as a DGNB, we're sometimes like, oh, now we have to look into that again. I guess that for an SME, or even Alexandra, for you, it would be nice to eventually have like a status quo, and I guess to have the security that all these different initiatives like are based on the same core, that they kind of generate synergies, because it feels at the moment we are kind of, all in that business of analyzing and trying to find out where the synergies are, at least in the communication to external stakeholders. So question for both of you. There's a question, to what extent you foresee that the processes are impacted by the taxonomy, especially, let's say, procurement for construction materials, requests for certification labels, kind of like how to push it into the value chain? Is that something, maybe Alexandra, for you as Asido, since what you do now anyway, that you have a certain standard when you procure materials? Or Fernando, what is your take? But maybe Alexandra first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to establish processes. I think Asidus, of course, does it in order to manage the compliance and to reach our targets. But I think this is something that every company does. We develop guidelines and have our framework, and we need certain processes to be able to manage these issues.
And maybe there's, before Fernando is maybe giving his perspective, there was a question explicitly to you on how you define renewable construction products. Carolina in the previous panel said there's no definition on the EU legislation level. Is there a definition in your work, or it's kind of
not really?
Alexandra,
Fernando, you first.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, it was to me. Sorry, maybe I misunderstood.
It was first to Alexandra, but
please, Alexandra, go ahead. Well. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yes, of course, we have an idea what renewable construction is, and this is these are essential for circular economy. So these are low pollution products and products that can be brought back into the biological loop. And we basically work with timber, for example, at the Silla Campus project, but there are, of course, also other projects. We always keep our eyes open and see what the market brings in terms of renewable construction products. But we have a material policy where we also define this. I think in case that there is no official description or definition of something, you can always discuss within your company and find get an idea of what this can be. So we don't always have to wait for official definitions, and we can discuss and go to our networks and talk about these issues in terms of renewable construction products and or other issues, and find our own way.
Okay, thank you. Fernando, from your perspective.
Yes, I mean, this is one of the circularity sprinklers I was talking about, because we, as you might know, now we are discussing the construction product regulation, which also tried, or at least discussed what is considered a product with enough sustainability elements in there. I don't want to get into specifics. I don't even know if I'm using the exactly right terms, but the thing is that there is now under discussion this idea of going towards more circularity in the manufacturing of products. So I hope and I understand, indeed, I agree with Alexandra. I'm happy to hear that we don't need to wait those definitions, but to go ahead with activity. But at some point, we need a kind of streamlining, rationalization of what we understand by the different terminologies that we have. And as of now, we are, again, a bit lost. So this might be an exercise, something to take on from the Commission, from the European institution side, that we need to clarify all the framework, including, let's not maybe say definitions, but bring concepts into a way that is understandable and that is agreed by all the actors that are in the process.
Okay, thank you. There's Fernando, maybe a follow-up question for you. What kind of simplicity may work for SMEs? I don't know if you can answer that, but maybe it's like your moment, have a wish list. What would you want to see, or what would work, you know, where you would say then it kind of get mainstreamed much quicker?
First of all, what we consider as something to invest time and dedicate really a lot of time is how to see how digital tools can help in the reporting part, because we know at the European level there are many initiatives going on. We're talking about the product passport for products. We're talking about digital building logbook, etc., etc. So we hope that there will be at some point a certain connection, a direct connection with all the tools, so that we have information that doesn't need to be repeated and that is actually stored and open to consultation upon certain conditions, for sure, for all people that are in the that are required in now a renovation project, going from the design phase, even so to the construction phase, but also in the question of the access to credits. So if we have already a centralization of information that is allowed through a digital tool, why not? Why not? But it is true that at the I mean, SMEs takes a lot of time to adopt new culture, to embrace innovation. A point of comparison, building information modeling, BIM has been there for what, 20, 25 years now, but we're still talking about how to use BIM in renovation projects. So digital, yes, let's investigate how it could help for the reporting, how it could help for the data collection. But again, this is something that will take time. But all in all, something that could simplify our life is the reuse of existing information in whatever shape, whatever form it is. Because I saw someone talking about procurement, public procurement. When we go to green public procurement, that is also something coming. Sometimes the amount of information that is requested is so huge that it prevents SME participation to tenders. If we add to that a component of sustainability, so going into more detail and more technical information to provide, it will, I mean, the interest will decline even more than it is already the case today. So that's why this is something to keep in mind. Pragmatic, not repeating things, not being time consuming, being in a jargon, in a terminology that is understandable by someone that is maybe a trainee to the entrepreneur, the main entrepreneur so we also need to figure out, if we train people, they will understand better. So we also need to think about that in order to simplify the concepts. It is a lot indeed to ask, but that's why we don't like this. Contrary to a bottom-up approach, where no imposed criteria, without much consultation. As far as I know, construction industry representatives weren't that involved in several tools regarding sustainability reporting, sustainable finance platform. Sorry, so this complicates the discussion. But we will have a look, and we will come with practical measures and proposals as well. That's for sure.
Okay, thank you. I think that is already kind of going towards the end and the summary. I think this is there's really a need for a very meaningful dialogue. I mean, this is just what I can confirm from the 2 taxonomy studies we've done on real buildings, that there's a gap. It's not that we don't want the market to move, but yeah, it's especially if we look at the percentages Carolina presented earlier. Yeah, and I think we always have to as well differentiate a little bit where are we on the timeline when we talk about circular economy, because the taxonomy is looking at today. So basically buildings which are like new construction buildings today, they were not planned and designed with these kind of criteria in mind. So the percentages we see required for building materials are quite challenging. And if you just document your materials today and you claim them to be recyclable sometime in the future, that doesn't really help you. So I think we always have to be clear when we talk about circular economy, where on the timeline we are and what part are we looking at the moment, and the as-is situation in the market from manufacturers, from availability, from recycled content products. We see that there's a gap from what we see in the study. And maybe Alexandra, to you the question, did you have a chance to look into the circular economy criteria already for the taxonomy? Or do you know, or where you would see as well on the previous, the climate change, climate mitigation criteria, where the biggest challenge are for you?
You mean
your projects?
you mean the criteria for significant contribution for circular economy?
Yeah.
Yes, of course, we always keep an eye of what's going on in terms of taxonomy, and of course we also realize that was the Taxo 4 is coming up. Fernando, I would like to say some words to what you said in terms of how can we be more pragmatic and deal with the requirements that are coming up with regulations. And of course, I would always agree that we need digital tools and we have to adapt to a new culture. This is very essential. But I think what we also have to come up with, and this is also something that goes for me together with adapt to a new culture, that we have to see that the sustainability work, especially in this transition phase that we currently are at, the whole market is, that it takes time and that it is complex and that we focus on specific topics. We have to manage this complexity. And this is very challenging sometimes, and we have to prioritize and see what's really necessary and what we do next and what are the certain steps that we have to go through. But I think we have to see and learn that sustainability work is challenging and is complex, and we have to find a pragmatic way of how to do this. But we also have to learn in our companies and as part of our culture within the companies that sustainability work is a complex thing, and we need teams that do this work as the financial department or as the project development department does. And it's not only one person that can do it, but we need the capacities to deal with this, because it's not very simple. Sustainability is very, very complex, especially when we have a holistic approach, and we have to go through this. To come back to significant contribution, circular economy, I think we have to go step by step. And we currently deal with the do no significant harm criterion at ACIDUS. But of course, we also have an eye on what are the topics and the broader definition for circular economy in the taxonomy, and also implement it into our developments. Because the taxonomy is for ACIDUS is basically the fundament, and then we look at what else is possible to reach a high sustainability quality.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we don't have any more questions in the chat. Well, we're missing one panelist, so we're a bit ahead of time. But I would like to close the circular talk for today. I think we had a long and very meaningful exchange of perspective. And if I like to try to summarize that a little bit, I think from the last session now, we really understood, and I think we cannot emphasize that enough towards the Commission, towards the regulatory active members as well of here, the audience. Even if it's not mandatory, the moment something comes as a common tool, and I think the market is really looking, and I think that makes sense, for a common language on sustainability, circularity, especially I would say circularity, because there's so many different approaches in the market, but it's all very vague sometimes. So even if it's not mandatory yet, the market could or will pick it up in a way that kind of implicitly starts making it mandatory, at least for some, because they just use it as a language for conducting their business. Like Fernando said, for the banks to make these decisions, and I can just echo that from my experience. We're working now a lot with banks who come to us, and they're really looking for a communication tool to not maximizing the revenue anymore. I think this time is gone, but to minimize the risk. So I think risk minimization is like the biggest topic at the moment, and everyone is looking for something that gives them that kind of security. So I think even if it's not mandatory, it gets mandatory very quickly. And in that sense, to support that transition, we need more pragmatism in how the criteria are framed, in how reporting things are being framed, and a very meaningful dialogue from really people out of the market, from people who are actually doing that work every day, and then to really look at the criteria. And as well, I think we need something like a roadmap. We asked Ben before for like the master plan. He said, well, it will be reviewed, but there's no master plan. But I think we need to have a process in place on how can we get that transition going, because I know there were some comments in the chat, and I completely agree. There's no way that we're going to accept non-sustainable business at all anymore, but we have to make it like not make it easy for everyone to get going and have a roadmap so they have the security where are things going, and not having criteria up there and then there's somewhere down there and then they're kind of left alone. Because I think that is as well what we saw from that discussion now. It takes some time for a company to build that knowledge, to be up to date, to monitor things, and especially for small SMEs, that is not possible to handle, and their digital tools should or must be a very critical part of the solution and on how to make that onboarding, that mainstreaming possible. So thank you very much. It was my try to summarize it a little bit. I hope you agree. And so thanks a lot, Fernando. Thanks a lot, Alexandra, for your contribution, your point of view, your honesty. I think that is very important. And we have these conversations that we're not kind of sharing marketing stories with each other, but that we're very honest about where the challenges are. And I think we will keep that dialogue open. Maybe we follow up with another circular talk, or maybe even a round table in Brussels, Fernando. Maybe that is something we could look at and really get that discussion going and show more on applications from the market to the Commission. So thanks very much. Thanks to all our audience. Thank you for all the questions in the chat. Yeah, and hopefully we'll see each other soon virtually, but ideally in person. Thank you very much. Have a good week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.